What do you imagine when you think of classic Russian writers like Tolstoy or Dostoevsky? Huge volumes with convoluted plots, names that are impossible to pronounce, and constant suffering? If you've been trying to approach Russian classics for a while but stopped because it seems to be too heavy and complicated, or you just simply don't know where to start, maybe you started from the wrong end. It indeed can be challenging to get acquainted with Russian literature, starting with, say, the Brothers Karamazov. That's exactly why I made this guide, to help you find the perfect starting point. In this video, I'll give you a 12-step ladder through Russian classics from short stories to epic novels. These 12 steps will be built into 4 parts, representing a specific era and its main archetype. First, you'll meet the little man, the powerless hero, the ordinary man who doesn't have any money or talent and who is pretty much invisible to the society. Then we'll step into the world of the superfluous man, the wealthy, educated intellectual who is too bored and disillusioned to give his life any meaning. From this, we'll ascend to the giants who ask probably the biggest questions a human could ask. This is the realm of the confronting man, characters who wage spiritual war against God, morality, and the very meaning of existence. Finally, the 20th century, with all its wars and revolutions, destroys these old forms, giving us the shattered man, where reality blends into magic, absurdity, and chaos. By following these 4 archetypes across 12 essential authors and their works, you won't just get a reading list, you'll get a compass to navigate the social structure, the unique mentality, and even the dark humor of Russia. This is the context that will transform how you read everything, from a Chekhov short story to the monumental novels of Dostoevsky. Привет everyone, my name's Saida, and here in this channel I'm sharing with you bits of Russian culture from a native person's perspective. Here we explore ideas to find answers to life's biggest questions. And this is your ultimate beginner's guide to Russian literature. Part 1. The Little Man. The Little Man is a literary archetype that emerged in the first half of the 19th century. This character is of low social standing, not endowed with great talent or strength, yet kind and harmless. Russian writers used him to introduce the aristocracy to the common man, to plead for humanism, to expose his defenselessness against society, his poverty, his tragic fate. Without understanding this archetype, you will not be able to fully grasp a lot of Dostoevsky's heroes, especially in his early period, or Tolstoy's drive in his late life to sell his whole estate. He was a count, by the way, and to sell his estate and work the land like a common peasant. And to get acquainted with the little man, I want to give you the names of 3 masters. Step 1. Nikolai Gogol, the prophet of the absurd. Gogol is the father of Russian surrealism and satire. He takes the bureaucracy, the social climbing, the sheer ridiculousness of life and amplifies it until it becomes a hilarious and terrifying nightmare. Specifically, I want to talk here about his story named The Overcoat. Meet Akaky Akakevich, a low-level clerk whose entire existence is defined by his worn-out overcoat. The epic journey to acquire a new coat and the tragic-comic consequences of its loss is one of the most influential stories in Russian and maybe even the world literature ever written. Dostoevsky later said, "We all came out from under Gogol's overcoat." Gogol's Akaky is such an interesting character. He evokes a whole range of feelings in a reader. You start the story by laughing at his obsessions and his weirdness, but you finish it crying for his humanity. But probably the most famous Gogol's book is the one called Dead Souls. The premise here is as following. A cunning conman named Chichikov travels across Russia, purchasing the legal titles to deceased serfs. These are like Russia's version of feudal slaves. So he purchases these titles in a satirical scheme to exploit a bureaucratic loophole for profit. You should read it for its brilliantly absurd humor and its profound poetic insight into human folly. Gogol genuinely inoculates you against taking Russian literature too seriously. He shows you the madness, the dark comedy, and the sheer imaginative power that is just as Russian as soul-searching melancholy. And that is why I highly suggest you to check his works first. Step 2. Anton Chekhov, the architect of the ordinary. Chekhov famously said, "Don't tell me the moon is shining. Show me the glint of its light on broken glass." He is the master of the unspoken. This author shows us life not in its grand tragedies, but in the quiet accumulation of small disappointments and missed connections. And here, I want to recommend you two of his stories. The first one being The Man in the Case. The Man in the Case showcases a particular version of the little man, the person who is afraid to live. Our main protagonist is the teacher named Belikov, who hides from the world in a literal and metaphorical case. His umbrella, his galoshes, his strict adherence to rules. It's a brilliant, darkly comic study of how one timid soul can cast a shadow of oppression over an entire community. It's devastating but very, very funny all at the same time. And it all refers to Gogol's Overcoat, as well as Dostoevsky's Notes from the Underground, by presenting the same archetypal character here. We'll talk about the notes a bit later, but for now I'll just say that while Dostoevsky's Underground Man rages against the world in these furious, philosophical monologues, Chekhov's Belikov shrinks from it in silent terror. Basically, that's two sides of the same coin, the rebellion of thought and the paralysis of fear. The second Chekhov short story that I want to recommend is called Gooseberries, and that is my personal favorite from him. The book is tiny and can be dealt with in 10-ish minutes. It follows Ivan Ivanich, and he tells his friends about his brother Nikolai, who sacrificed everything, including his wife's health, to achieve his dream of owning property with gooseberry bushes. This is a tale about human suffering, happiness, inequality, and compassion. In just a few pages, it asks one of the most piercing questions. What is the cost of a selfish dream? It's a lesson in empathy that will stay with you forever. At least it did so for me. I remember reading it when I was about 11 or 12, and how I cried then for several hours and thought about it for weeks, if not months. It really touched me in a way that I hadn't experienced with literature ever before. So I cannot recommend it enough. Step 3, Fyodor Dostoevsky, The Heart of the Dreamer. Before we meet the titan of philosophical novels, let's meet the young Dostoevsky first, the poet of St. Petersburg's lonely souls. Here I recommend getting acquainted with White Nights or Poor Folk, or both. White Nights is a short, heartbreaking novella about a nameless dreamer who, over 4 white nights of summer, falls in love with a girl waiting for another man. It's not about grand ideas yet. It's about the ecstasy of human connection, even and maybe especially if it is momentary, and the agony of returning to solitude. The story introduces you to Dostoevsky's incredible empathy and his deep understanding of the human heart. Reading it, you understand that all of his later complex characters started from this profound, almost painful sensitivity. Poor Folk is his first novel and an excellent entry point. It's an epistolary novel, so a novel told in letters between 2 poor distant relatives. It's a direct continuation of the little man theme from Gogol's The Overcoat, but with much deeper psychological insight and tenderness. And just like that, we get the triad of the little man. Gogol positioned the type, Chekhov showed us his fear, and Dostoevsky laid bare his soul. Part 2. The Superfluous Man. The Superfluous Man is the gifted nobleman of the mid-19th century who found no use for his talents. Alienated from society and disillusioned with life, he is immune to ambition or moral self-improvement. With no practical prospects, he indulges in futile philosophizing and idle reflection, diluted by empty pleasures. His defining trait is his negative influence on everyone around him and a strong tendency toward nihilism and contempt for others as well as for himself. In this part, we will also have 3 great Russian authors, and they masterpieces that depicted this type of character the best. Step 4. Alexander Pushkin, the son of Russian culture. Pushkin is our Shakespeare. He is the source. He created the modern Russian literary language, and you cannot understand what comes after him without studying him first. And the absolute required reading for you by Pushkin is Yevgeny Onegin. This story is deceptively simple. The worldly bored dandy Onegin rejects the sincere love of the young Tatiana, only to fall desperately in love with her years later when she is a mature, married society woman. The tragedy is exquisite, but such plots have been done before Pushkin multiple times. The true magic of the poem doesn't lie in the narrative itself. It is in the voice of the narrator. Witty, disgressive, melancholic. It's a novel drenched in literary and cultural references. Pushkin playfully refers to Byron, to Shakespeare, notes to classical mythology, parodies of sentimental novels, and sharp commentary on Russian high society, fashion, and even food. He's in constant witty dialogue with European culture and the literary trends of his day. Spotting these layers is a huge part of the fun. To read Onegin is to get a crash course on the entire cultural vocabulary of early 19th century Russia and partly Europe. And yes, it's a novel in verse, but do not let that intimidate you. Find a good translation that preserves the rhythm and wit. I recommend James Fallon's. Also, if you want to dig deeper into this novel, I highly recommend reading it in parallel with Yuri Lotman's commentary. For a contemporary reader like you and me, it's almost impossible to understand all the references in this book, and Lotman can be of huge help here. And just to give you a little taste of the poem's tone, here is how it starts. My uncle, man of firm convictions, by falling gravely ill, he's won a due respect for his afflictions, the only clever thing he's done. May his example profit others, but God, what deadly boredom, brothers, to tend the sick man night and day, not daring once to steal away, and oh, how base to pamper grossly and entertain the nearly dead, to fluff the pillows for his head, and pass him medicines morosely, while thinking under every sigh, the devil take you, uncle, die. Step 5. Mikhail Lermontov, The Anatomy of Disillusionment. Lermontov died very young, at the cursed age of 27. So he wrote only one novel, but it changed everything. A Hero of Our Time is the birthplace of the Russian anti-hero. This isn't a traditional linear novel. It's a series of interconnected stories told out of order that slowly piece together the puzzle of its protagonist, Grigory Pechorin. Pechorin is this brilliant, charismatic, handsome, and utterly destructively bored. So he is this classic example of the superfluous man. It is a man of great potential who has no outlet for his talents in the stifling society of his time. He manipulates people, falls in love, takes part in duels, not out of passion, but out of desperate attempt to feel something, anything, to combat this existential boredom. He is, in his own words, the axe in the hands of fate. But he's also a self-aware and tragically modern figure. Similar to Albert Camus, The Stranger, Lermontov's character will feel eerily familiar to anyone who has ever felt disconnected in the modern world. Step 6. Ivan Goncharov, The Comedy of Inertia. While Lermontov's hero is active in his self-destruction, Goncharov's is a definition of passivity. Oblomov is a novel about a man who fights a heroic battle against getting out of bed. The first 150 pages of this novel take place almost entirely in Ilya Ilyich Oblomov's bedroom. He is kind, intelligent, and noble, but he is paralyzed by a condition that became known as Oblomovshina, or Oblomovism in English. It's a spiritual apathy, a daydreaming inertia, a refusal to engage with the demands and vulgarities of the modern world. His friend Stolz, the energetic German businessman, represents the opposite. Action, progress, and practicality. He is the man of the future, while Oblomov is the man of the dying past. The novel isn't just making fun of Oblomov. It's a profound and surprisingly funny critique of both a dying aristocratic class and the soullessness of modern ambition. In our age of burnout and the Great Resignation, Oblomov might be the most relevant Russian hero of all. Concluding this part, I want to emphasize that without this archetype, characters like Tolstoy's Vronsky from Anna Karenina or Dostoevsky's Stavlagin from Demons will remain enigmatic, as they are direct descendants of this trope. So, again, highly suggest you to pick up at least one of these 3 books before moving further. Part 3. The Confronting Man. Wrestling with God and Meaning. We've spent time with the superfluous man. Brilliant, educated, and utterly paralyzed. They saw the flaws of their world, but could do nothing but lounge in armchairs and sigh. But what happens when that paralysis turns into action? When the idol becomes the active destroyer? In the 1860s, a new type of character emerged in Russian literature. He wasn't bored, he was angry. He didn't retreat into himself, he attacked everything outside. Art, love, authority, tradition, he wanted to tear it all down and start from zero. He called himself a nihilist, and his name was Yevgeny Bazarov. Step 7. Ivan Turgenev, The Birth of the Nihilist. Turgenev's fathers and sons gave Russian literature something it had never seen before. Yevgeny Bazarov, a physician turned nihilist who believes in nothing but science and useful work. He rejects art, poetry, love, authority, everything his father's generation held sacred. He is the ultimate rationalist, convinced that he can dissect life like a frog in a lab. But life, as Turgenev shows with heartbreaking clarity, doesn't submit to dissection. When Bazarov falls passionately in love against his will, his entire philosophy collapses. He doesn't just lose an argument, he loses himself. Bazarov is the bridge. He takes the superfluous man's alienation and turns it into a full-blown ideology. And that ideology, nihilism, becomes the fuel for the great philosophical fires that Dostoevsky and Tolstoy will spend their lives trying to contain. Step 8. Fyodor Dostoevsky, What Lives in the Dark. Dostoevsky is not just a great storyteller, but a writer who immensely influenced the world of psychology, philosophy, and our understanding of ourselves. His genius lies in a terrifying revelation. He discovered that human nature is fundamentally irrational and thrives on suffering, all the while the 19th century believed in progress, reason, and positivist ideas. Dostoevsky didn't just write novels, he built psychological and philosophical laboratories. He would take an idea and drop a living character into it like a chemical reagent. And then he would watch as an idea devoured them from the inside. He didn't judge even his most monstrous characters. Instead, he gave them the most compelling arguments. That's why reading him is not entertainment. It's an existential challenge. He forces you to stand on the edge of the abyss of your own beliefs and look down. He asks the questions that have no easy answers, or no answers at all. What happens to a world without God? Can we be moral without faith? Is suffering necessary for consciousness? He predicted the spiritual crisis of the 20th century, the rise of nihilism, totalitarian ideologies, and the fragmentation of the self, decades before it happened. Freud, Nietzsche, and existentialists like Camus and Sartre would later walk the path that he blasted through the human psyche. So when we approach Dostoevsky's books, it's important to understand that we are not just reading stories. We are watching a man dissect the human soul with surgical precision, and the patient is always us. And it all starts with a crime. Crime and Punishment is the most accessible of his great novels. It's a gripping psychological thriller about a young man named Raskolnikov, a poor student who murders a pawnbroker to prove to himself that he is a great man and has, unlike ordinary little people, the right to cross the line, that he is a Napoleon, a superior being above conventional morality. The novel isn't really about the crime, but it is about the punishment, which is the psychological torture of Raskolnikov's own guilt and isolation. It's a masterclass in suspense and moral philosophy. It's utterly gripping and introduces you to Dostoevsky's core themes of morality, guilt, and redemption in the most accessible way possible. After the intensity of Crime and Punishment, you're ready for what Dostoevsky himself considered his most challenging task, portraying a positively good man. It's in a way Dostoevsky's thought experiment. What if there was a man who actually lived out the Christian ideal? And that's how Knyaz, or Prince, Myshkin was born, and the novel named The Idiot was written. Myshkin is one of literature's most unique characters. He is pure, naive, empathetic, and utterly unprepared for the corrupt, cynical world that he enters. The Idiot is a tragic examination of whether true goodness can survive in society. It's a sprawling, emotional, and deeply affecting novel that showcases the full range of Dostoevsky's dramatic power. And the third book is The Brothers Karamazov, Dostoevsky's final and greatest work. It's about a patricide, but it's really about the existence of God, the problem of evil, and the nature of freedom. The Grand Inquisitor chapter, a parable told by the intellectual Ivan Karamazov, is one of the most powerful critiques of religious authority ever written. This book contains the whole of human experience, and you will appreciate it infinitely more having followed this path. And before we move on from Fyodor Mikhailovich, some honorable mentions. Demons and Notes from Underground. I love these novels, but I could not include them in the list in order not to scare you away completely, so consider it your recommended instead of required reading. Demons is Dostoevsky's political prophecy. A group of nihilistic revolutionaries brings chaos to a provincial town. Written decades before the Russian revolutions, it's a chilling exploration of how abstract, godless ideas can possess people and lead to literal destruction. It is the essential bridge from the failure of personal morality to the sickness of an entire society. Notes from Underground is a furious, claustrophobic monologue by a nameless narrator, so-called the Underground Man. He is the archetype of modern consciousness gone rotten, hyper-intelligent yet impotent, pathologically self-aware and paralyzed by his own analysis. He viciously dismantles the 19th century naive faith in reason, progress, and utopian societies, arguing that human nature's greatest need is not happiness, but the freedom to choose its own suffering, simply to prove that it is free. Dostoevsky is my favorite writer, and I have plans to make like a dozen more videos specifically dedicated to him and his work. So if that is something that you're interested in, subscribe to be notified when they come out. Step 9. Leo Tolstoy, The Epic of Life Itself. If Dostoevsky looks up to the heavens and down into the abyss, Tolstoy looks straight at life in all of its sprawling, messy detail. His goal was to capture the texture of life itself, the thoughts, the feelings, the seemingly insignificant moments that make up our existence. And here I've picked out 3 novels as well. The first one being The Death of Ivan Ilyich. It is a short, brutal, and truly life-changing novel about a successful judge who, on his deathbed, realizes that his entire life has been a pleasant, well-decorated lie. It is the ultimate meditation on mortality and authenticity. It will ask you the most important question. What if your whole life has been wrong, and you don't have any time to fix it now? And what if you do? The other 2 novels most probably are not going to be a surprise for you. It has to be Anna Karenina and War and Peace, of course. Anna Karenina opens with the famous line, "All happy families are alike, each unhappy family is unhappy in its own way." And it is the theme and the key to the whole book. This novel contrasts the story of Anna's passionate, socially destroying affair with Vronsky with the story of Levin's spiritual search for meaning and family. For some reason, the reason probably being its marketability, popular media likes to present only the first storyline and completely neglects the Levin's narrative arc. To me, it is unfathomable since both stories are absolutely necessary for the novel. In a way, they reflect each other. Through them, Tolstoy shows us how to love and how not to do so. However, it's not a simple morality tale, contrary to what lots of people think of it. It's a profound exploration of the different ways we seek love, happiness, and truth. And yes, I think there will be a separate video on this book as well. So you know what to do. And the third, War and Peace. Don't be mad at me. I could not make a guide to Russian literature and not include War and Peace. It's just a non-negotiable. The trick to read it is to read it not as a single story, but as a vast, beautiful tapestry of life. Focus on the characters and follow the characters that you love, Pierre, Natasha, Andrei, and let the historical parts wash over you. It is about history, yes, but it's more about how individuals find their place in the great chaotic river of events. Just live inside this world. Feel Natasha's heart pounding at her first ball, share Pierre's clumsy, desperate search for life's meaning, despair with Andrei under the infinite sky of Austerlitz. War and Peace shouldn't be a torture. It's a gift of time travel, of living other lives so fully that when you finish, you'll feel a profound sense of loss and a deeper understanding of your own world. So come for the love stories and family drama. The history and philosophy will find you when you're ready. Just give it a chance. Part 4, The 20th Century and the Shattered Man. Revolution, Magic, and Silence. The 20th century shattered Russia. Revolution, civil war, Stalinist terror, 2 world wars. The literature could no longer be what it was. The old forms could no longer contain the new reality. How do you write about the human soul after it's been crushed by history? Some writers found new languages, surreal, magical, fractured. Others were simply silenced. This is where we meet some of the most extraordinary voices of the Soviet era, writers who had to invent entirely new ways to tell the truth. And one of them was Mikhail Bulgakov. Step 10. Mikhail Bulgakov, The Magician of Despair. Probably you've already heard about Bulgakov's The Master and Margarita. It's one of those books everyone recommends, and for good reason. The plot is pure chaos in the best way. The devil himself, Professor Walland, arrives in 1930s Moscow with a bizarre entourage, a giant black cat who drinks vodka and shoots pistols, a henchman with fangs, a naked witch who flies on a broom. They expose the city's bureaucrats, writers, and landlords as greedy, cowardly, and utterly hollow. But underneath the satire is something much deeper. Interspersed with the Moscow chaos is a separate story. Pontius Pilate, alone in his palace, interrogating a wandering philosopher named Yeshua. It's Bulgakov's retelling of the gospel. And of the center of it all is the love story. The master, a writer destroyed by the literary establishment, and Margarita, a woman who sells her soul to the devil to save him. Bulgakov wrote this novel in secret, knowing it could never be published in his lifetime. He was blind, dying, and dictating the final chapters to his wife. The book is, among many things, a declaration. Art and love are the only forces that can outlast tyranny. Step 11. Andrei Platonov, The Voice from the Dirt. Speaking of Andrei Platonov, even though I love everything that he's written, I want to introduce you here to his most famous work, the novel called The Foundation Pit. The novel takes place during collectivization, when peasants were forced onto collective farms. A group of workers starts digging a pit for a future proletarian paradise, a grand housing project that never gets built. They dig through winter, through hunger, through exhaustion. The pit gets wider and deeper, but nothing grows there. Nothing is built. By the end, you realize that the pit was never even meant for housing. It has become something else entirely. Platonov's language here is also very specific and thought through. It is deliberately clumsy, defamiliarized to mirror the distortion of life and language under the Soviet system. I can guarantee you, it is one of the most devastating books that you will ever read in your life. Step 12. The Poets. 3 responses to the brave new world. Prose could document the horror, but poetry could become the horror, could sing it, could scream it. In the 20th century, Russian poetry gave us 3 voices that could not be more different, yet together they captured the entire arc of the Russian catastrophe. The first one, Anna Akhmatova and her poem Requiem. Requiem is a monument dedicated to mothers waiting for their sons to be released from prison during Stalin's regime. For 17 months, Akhmatova herself stood outside Leningrad's prisons during the terror, waiting for news of her imprisoned son, next to other women with the same pain, the same grief, the same fate. It is the voice of every mother, every wife, every woman who waited and prayed and who was told nothing. It is quiet, dignified, and unbearable. The second poet I want to introduce you here to is Alexander Blok and his poem The 12. The 12 is a poem about 12 Red Army soldiers marching through a revolutionary blizzard. At the end, they see Christ himself appear, leading them. No one knows if Blok meant it as blasphemy or prophecy, but nevertheless the poem is chaotic, rhythmic, and terrifying. It captures the revolution not as an idea, but as a force of nature, blind, cold, and unstoppable. And the last poet for now is Vladimir Mayakovsky. Mayakovsky was loud, brash, theatrical. A futurist, he wanted to burn the old art to the ground and build something new from the ashes. His poems are all sharp angles, shouting, marching rhythms. He wrote for the masses, for the streets, for the world, for the new world. In 1930, at the age of 37, however, he shot himself. His last poem ends with the line, "The love boat has smashed against the everyday." He believed in the future more than anyone, and the future killed him. Okay, we've come a very long way. From Chekhov's quiet moments to the cosmic scale of the brothers Karamazov, from Gogol's absurdity to the magical realism of Bulgakov. Here in this video, we've only scratched the surface. Remember, this is a map, not a set of orders. Let your curiosity be your guide. If you fall in love with Turgenev's prose, stay there for a while. If you're captivated by Pechorin's cynicism, explore the Superfluous Man further. The goal is not to finish a list, but to start a lifelong conversation. These books are very important to me. They have been my companions, my teachers, my mirrors. They have taught me about resilience, about asking the big questions, even when you know in advance that there are no answers. So here it is. Save this video and use it as a guide for a long journey ahead. Subscribe and let's continue the journey together. Tell me in the comments below what exact books, writers, or philosophies you want me to explore in the videos to come. Have a good rest of your week. Пока!